Virginia Tech, coached by Mike Young, your guy. Good squad. Virginia, we know under Tony Bennett, is back to where they were in 2019. I think they can score. I think Virginia's good. Can they win a national championship?
Might want to slow down on the 19 comparison.
I'm just saying, they're back to...
They're a functional offense now, yes.
I think they're back to 19 levels.
Wow.
When it's all said and done.
Wow.
Okay. Maybe it's a byproduct of where the ACC is that I'm falling more in love with Virginia. Wow. It could say more about the conference than anything else.
Number 2, Ken Palm offense in 19. Let's see where they are right now.
Where
11.
Okay.
So
they can get there.
You're in the ballpark at least.
They can get there. All right. It's still early. There's 2 teams that I don't know anything about yet, though.
Just because they're 2, though. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
There's 2 teams. Yeah, I was going to say, don't
confuse. The number is actually different.
Yeah,
but
don't confuse. Also, don't confuse offensive efficiency and whether or not they're actually good.
Well,
sometimes.
no, because he's had groups that were not offensively efficient, but because they were so dominant defensively, they could win basketball games.
They could win basketball games.
The trick about let's not leave out 18. And I get that they lost in the first round of the NCAA tournament.
That was a good squad, man.
That was I left New York that year after they beat the teams that they beat, and I was like, okay, I'm about to see this team in the national championship in the Final Four. Like, that's how good they were.
All I'm saying is that I'm high on Virginia this year, and maybe I got so accustomed to watching their offense not to be functional that seeing them back to that level makes me go, I've seen this before. And yeah, maybe I am shortchanging that 19 squad. That was filled with dudes, but they seem to have some guys. They're not dudes yet. They got guys. So I'll concede that. There's 2 teams that I don't know anything about still, though. One team I should know something about, but they're still kind of working themselves out. And then there's NC State. We'll talk about the first team that I mentioned. That team that I'm referencing is North Carolina. We should know what North Carolina is about because of how they closed out last year, making it to the championship game, knocking off Duke and everything else, and they bring everybody back. They should have this identity. Instead, what we're coming to find out is this team still doesn't really have an identity. What is it? Okay. Last year's squad filled it up from 3 because Brady Manick couldn't miss. You know what this team can't do right now because they don't have anybody to replace Brady Manick's three-point production? Hit threes. They're terrible from 3, right? Armando Bacot wasn't 100% in the end of the 4-overtime Alabama game following into the Indiana game because of his ankle. He had an AC sprain. They get the week off. They come home. They play Georgia Tech. They shifted a little bit. They weren't so they went back to just running through Armando Bacot, who you call like the greatest garbage man. Was that because of Georgia Tech? Is that what they're going to try to – is that what Hubert Davis is adjusting to, knowing they don't have somebody who can fill it up from 3 because that's not part of their identity? Again, I don't know what North Carolina is yet, despite the fact I remember all the players from last year. It's confusing. They're a really confusing team. The Wolfpack, on the other hand – new members on the staff, some new players, and yet the Wolfpack still kind of play the same way they've been playing the last couple of years under Kevin Keatts, and that's gotten them off to an 0-2 start with a loss to Miami on the road. I think the Pitt loss at home was more alarming than going on the road and losing to Miami, which, as I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, it seems to be like a pretty good squad. But NC State, it's just more of the same so far, and I don't see that sitting well with the fan base.
The problem with the more of the same is it's on the defensive end, and that's where Kevin's teams have tended to get in trouble. And you look at the Miami loss, you look at the Kansas loss, 80 points. You're not going to win many games when you give up 80 points. You just aren't in college basketball. And I don't know how you improve defensively when you just lost your 5, Dusan Mahorsic, who was your actual defensive 5, and now you're going to try to lean on DJ Burns a little bit. He's a better scorer than a defender. So you're really getting yourself into this mindset, well, we're just going to start outscoring people. Well, that's going to require Casey Morsell and Jack Clark playing at a level that, quite frankly, they haven't been playing at. In these, they've played 3 games, in my opinion, that matter so far. Kansas, and that's shortchanging Dayton and Butler, and we'll get back to those games. But notice in those games, Dayton scores 64, Butler scores 61.
Yeah,
that's not 80.
Yeah,
So, is there still time to save the baby from the bathwater here? Of course,
there is.
But some of that DNA. The thing about defense is it doesn't require talent.
Mm-hmm.
It requires effort. And
So-
it requires you buying in and understanding that the way to win basketball games, and we saw this with Carolina last year, by the way. Once they realized the way to win basketball games is to get stops when they're necessary, that's when you really start understanding how to win basketball games.
So why
when you
haven't
just
they
sit
been
here
able
and
to
think,
do
oh,
that? That's
'cause you
the
don't-
problem.
it's either not emphasized,
Yeah.
which is possible, or you don't, it's like your kids with their homework, right? You're like, hey, all you got to do is turn these assignments in and you're going to get a B.
Yes.
Like, just turn the freaking assignments in, you'll get a B. Like, expend yourself on the defensive side of the floor and you're going to get a B, right? I've never been more relatable in my life. This is my best analogy of all time.
Yeah, no, it's bothersome because you're now taking me back to my older son's 8th grade year entirely. Just turn in your work.
turn it
dude.
in.
It ain't that hard.
I'm not asking you to make 500 three-pointers
well,
on
you
the
know,
test. I'm asking you to do your homework.
the Google Classroom was logged out,
crashed.
and Canvas wasn't working that day. I'm like, your friends don't seem to have these issues.
My teacher said I could make it up in class.
Yeah, blah blah. Yeah, that's bothersome.
So, yeah, you want to play a little lay defense on Federico from Pitt? Well, this is what happens.
It's the OG alongside Joe Giglio.
You didn't know there was a Federico, did you?
No, I know.
Okay.
I know. And I just hope that Jeff Capel's not listening to any of our podcasts or watching on YouTube. It's not a knock on Pitt.
No, actually, Pitt's pretty good this year.
Pitt might be fine this year, in the grand scheme of
They're
things.
not the same Pitt team that went and pushed around the heels in Smith Center last year and had some trash talk for the heels.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't that. That was
fratricide there.
That was the UNC loss that next day I was like, that's it. Carolina ain't getting in the NCAA tournament. Of course, they didn't lose a game until the championship or until the ACC tournament.
Tell
after
my
that.
boy.
To your boy, Mike Young at Virginia Tech. And yes, Virginia fans, when we give praise to Virginia Tech, we are not taking away from Virginia, just so you know.